Welcome to the second episode of Coffee and Audio Talk. In this series I share my thoughts about all things audiophile and coffee, and in this episode I want to talk about acoustics. This is not a lecture, instead I want to inspire you to think about acoustics in a different way. So, let's talk. It's a rainy day. I was sitting in my favorite coffee spot, looking on my iPad through all the different audiophile forums out there, and one post caught my eye. There was this guy who posted a picture of his system. He was proud of it, so he wanted to show it, and on the side walls he had some acoustic materials, and there were two posts below that bothered me. One, somebody said, well, that is not doing anything acoustically, and the other post said, you need to use real acoustic material. Here's my take on why I think they are wrong. So the comment of the first guy was, this does not do anything acoustically. And here's the reason why he's wrong. He is wrong because every single thing in your room will have an effect on acoustics. That's not snake oil, that's just physics. The sound wave will react with everything that is in your room, and softer materials like this couch will absorb the sound wave more, and harder materials like the windows or the walls will reflect the sound wave more. So saying it has no effect on acoustics is just wrong, because every single thing, whether it's a plant, a bookcase, a table, a chair, whether it's designed to be acoustic treatment or not, it will have an effect on your acoustics. The other commenter said you need to use real acoustic material. Now over here I have some examples. The two in the middle over there, those are real, whatever that may mean, acoustic foam materials, and they are quite thick. They have a different design because they are designed for different frequencies. But the commenter is saying you need to use that and you cannot use something else apparently. But over here is a big thick cushion I got from IKEA, and I'm using it in the narrow space next to the equipment stand. And I'm not only using this cushion, I'm also using this material, which is foam used for isolation. And the spot where I am using that, if you remember my system, you have seen this case with this blue cover in front of it, which is acoustic materials, but this whole equipment stand is filled with this foam. This means that if everything in your room will have an effect on the acoustics, you could have a look around in your room and look at every piece of equipment and think, okay, what does it do acoustically and can I use it in the right spot? For example, here is my loudspeaker. Right next to it is, or used to be, is a big wall, a hard, flat surface. And that's not what you want. I will explain in a moment why. But what I did is I got me some curtains that I could use to treat this first reflection point. I could have made two pieces of curtain, one going in that corner, one going in that corner, and not having anything over here in front of that wall. But what I did, I made three pieces of curtains, so I could hang one in the middle to cover up that flat wall, that hard surface right next to a loudspeaker, to change the first reflection point. now I have to explain what is a first reflection and why is that a problem. Well, let me back up a little bit. What you see over here is, focus, my loudspeaker, and over there is where I'm sitting when I'm listening to music. Now sound is coming from the loudspeaker to me. This is direct sound. That is mostly what I want to hear. But because this loudspeaker is so close to this wall, sound is also going to go to the right of the loudspeaker, bouncing at that wall and arriving at my listening spot at just a fraction of a second later. And let me show you from another perspective. So you're sitting over there, here's the loudspeaker, you want to hear the direct sound, but because sound is going always from the loudspeaker, it will also go to the side, hit this hard surface, and then go to your listening position. Now the thing is that everything that will arrive, all sounds that will arrive at your listening position within 20 milliseconds of the direct sound will be interpreted by your brain as direct sound. But the sound that goes over there takes a little detour, so it is a little bit later. It's just a tiny bit later, but it will destroy your focus, your stereo image. And that's why a first reflection point is, well, it's vital to treat it. And how do you treat a first reflection point? Well, very simple. That's it. The sound coming from the loudspeaker going through the sidewall is now being absorbed. So now the time delay becomes much longer, and your brain, when receiving all these sounds from the room, will be able to distinguish the direct sound from what I shall call the echo. So for example, if sound goes always from the loudspeaker, it also goes to the back wall, and from there it will reflect to your listening position. But because, in my case at least, because the distance from there to there and then back will be enough delay for the brain to know what is the original sound and what is the echo in the room. Now let me show you what I did in this room with official acoustic materials and just being creative. First of all, this is my right loudspeaker, and in this room I have this column actually right in the middle of the room, and this loudspeaker is very close to that column. So what I did, I placed some acoustic material. This is something that I made. I'll have a picture inserted here if I don't forget it, to make sure that everything that is coming from the side of the loudspeaker is being absorbed. Then, if we look over here, you can see over there is a big panel that I made myself, an acoustic panel with some white fabric over it to let it blend a little bit with the rest of the colors. But I have this because of this strange little corner that I have there that can cause all kind of acoustical problems. So one way to deal with that is to try and absorb some of those sound waves, and mostly I did this right behind the record player, so sound coming from the back wall is being absorbed instead of being scattered right back to the record player. So on the side here there's this cushion that I have. And the main rule is the thicker the material, the more it will do something for the lower notes. The thinner the material, the more it will do something for the higher notes. So depending on what problem you engage, you choose a lighter or a more dense material. So as I showed you, I filled this equipment rack up with a lot of insulation, which is heavy and dense. So this is mainly to try and tone down the bass problem I had a little bit in this room, and actually I think it's working. Your corners are also a bad place for acoustics. I'm not going into the details, that's not what this video is about, but it's always a good idea to try and absorb or diffuse, scatter around the sound waves coming into the corner. So what I did was I used these curtains, and it could also be a plant, it could be a bookcase, just something to try and not make it a 90% horizontal corner. So I already showed you the curtain for the first reflection. Then this couch will have a very different effect on the sounds when you have a thin framed couch. So mostly everything that I buy is because I'm a crazy audiophile. The question is always, is this going to help me with my sound or not? And bass is the most difficult to absorb or correct in a room, and at the minimum what you need is moss. And these are very thick, very heavy. This is a very thick, very heavy couch, which does a lot of that for me. Now over there is another curtain in the corner. I even placed a lamp over there. You know, and these are IKEA lamps. This is only thin paper, but in the mid, mostly in the higher frequencies, it will have an effect. And it may not be the effect that you want, but that's where the hobby comes in, and you have to try and experiment as much as you can. Also, that's why I am always choosing carpet instead of tiles or wooden floor. I love to have a wooden floor, but that's always going to be a problem for the sound that I want. And then at the back wall you see all these things hanging. Those are picture frames that I just bought off, let's say, Craigslist, but it's called different here in the Netherlands. And what it is all kind of picture frames. I filled it, instead of a picture, a painting, with acoustic material, and then that acoustic material has some fabric over it. So if we have a closer look, I got this wonderful old picture frames, real wood. I took out the picture, the painting, and I put in, let me get a good look, and I put in this acoustic material. This is a very thick acoustic material. Over there is one that is a little bit thinner. So if you would do everything the same kind of acoustic material, it will also mean that it will do the same for the acoustics. By changing the materials and the depth and the thickness, you get a much more broader frequency response that you can treat. I'm trying to find the right words here, but I hope you understand that if if you don't measure, if you do it like me, just out of hobby and experimenting, these are the kind of things that you can do. And what I'm hoping to do in this video is to inspire you to think of what would be a nice way to make my own acoustic panels, and what can I do, how creative can I be to integrate it into my, in this case, into my living room. Because sometimes these rooms, the pictures of these audiophile rooms that you see, they look more like a studio. In the most worst scenario, they have these egg cartons on the wall, which is of course ugly. And also the acoustic foam with what this whole video started. It's not beautiful. It can be functional, but it's not beautiful. And over here is my listening spot, and right behind it I have this very big acoustic panel dampening all the reflections coming from the back wall, because here we have the loudspeaker again, another first reflection can be from the loudspeaker to the back wall to your listening position. If this, when you're sitting very close to the back wall, there is also a place for a first reflection that you don't want. So what I did, because this reflects over there, so I'm damping this first reflection with this big acoustic panel. Okay, so to recap, when you're sitting in your listening position and you want a good solid stereo image, one of the main what you mostly want to do is to make sure that you hear the direct sound from the loudspeakers and not the first reflections. And everything within 10 to 20 milliseconds arriving together with the direct sound at your listening position will destroy your focus of your stereo image. Now you might say, well, 20 or 10 milliseconds, that's just nothing, so why should I bother? Well, our ears and our brain are so sensitive, you should not underestimate that. For example, the only reason we hear a stereo image, meaning an image right over there, because there is nothing there. There's a loudspeaker over there, there's a loudspeaker over there. Stereo does not exist there in the real world, only in your brain. And the reason we can do that is because the sound coming from the loudspeaker to your left ear and the sound coming from the left speaker to your right ear, the sound to the left ear goes there just a fraction of a second earlier than the sound from the right ear, and still that is enough for our brain to see the stereo image. You know, when you are closing your eyes, you're standing somewhere, you close your eyes, somebody is somewhere standing around you, and when he says something, you will know where this person is standing, and that's only because the sound of that person is arriving at one ear just a fraction of a second earlier than the other ear, and that's how we can localize where somebody is. Well, that's of course in evolution, that process has been upgraded for the last millions of years, so don't underestimate that. And it's the reason why we can hear stereo in the middle without there being anything in the middle. So those little time differences do matter, and well, my advice is make sure that you treat as much of the first reflections you can find from your listening position. Okay, so that's the end of the video. I hope I've inspired you to think about your room and your room acoustics in another way, and I will see you next time.